Welcome back to the Value Exchange podcast, episode 12. Today I'm joined by Kieran. Tell us a little bit about your role at Dad's Matter and what Dad's Matters is.
Well, I'm going to correct the name first. It's Dad Matters.
Dad Matters.
Yeah, just for context, so what the name derives from is My Dad Matters. It's all about the baby at the end of the day. So baby's essential to the work that we do. And we talk about my dad being an individual because babies have a dad. So that's the reason it's Dad Matters. But we do get confused a lot. A lot of people say Dad's Matter or Dad's Matters, and it can be confusing for people. So yeah, it's important we get that right, because there are other organisations or groups that are called other things, and they don't do the same things as us. But yeah, Dad Matters is a Home Start project. Home Start's a charity across the UK. It's like a federated charity, so there's lots of different individual charities called Home Start. In Greater Manchester, we've got 4. There's Home Start Trafford, Salford and Wigan, Home Start Rochdale and Bury, and Home Start Manchester. And my Home Start's Home Start Host, and we cover Oldham, Stockport, Tameside and Bolton. We have lots of different projects there, like infant feeding support, family support, where we do visits in the home for families with children under 5. We've got speech and language programs that help with school readiness. And then Dad Matters is one of the projects that we developed a few years ago there to support dads with under 2s.
Okay, so it's its own little project essentially.
Yeah, it's a project within a larger charity. We started in Greater Manchester in Tameside in 2017. Then we branched out into the whole of Greater Manchester over the next 3 years. Then we started to recruit staff to do more work. And then we started to share it with other Home Start schemes. So we also have Dad Matters workers at Home Start Manchester and Home Start Trafford, Salford and Wigan, who cover Manchester and Salford. And then we've got 8 other coordinators in my Home Start. So in Manchester there's 11 of us.
Wow.
But then across the UK there's about 36 of us now, with 23 other Home Start schemes employing those members of staff, from London and Gloucestershire and Bristol and Somerset to Wales and Cheshire and Merseyside, Lancashire like Blackburn, Blackpool, and then over in Yorkshire, West Yorkshire, we've got a few there as well. And we're reaching tens of thousands of dads in universal spaces, which tends to be antenatal clinics, postnatal wards, neonatal units, mother and baby units, places like that. We're also supporting thousands of dads with one-to-one support. That is really open. There's not one thing that we just offer. It's just about the dad, what they need, what they want to talk about, what their problems are, what their challenges they might face, and also what services they want to engage with. So we're reaching lots and lots of dads. We're probably one of the biggest biggest reach organisations for dads in the UK.
Just gonna move this a bit closer. Oh,
yeah, put it right in front of my face. That's how.
No, that should be a bit better.
Yeah, no worries.
So one thing I take from that is growing, and growing quickly.
Yeah, we did grow pretty quickly. Between 2017 and 2020, it was just me. Worked in Tameside. I saw 20 dads in one-to-one. Saw about 200 dads in the antenatal clinics at the hospital, which was still a really good number. And we did consultation to build the brand and the colours and language and resources in the offer, with about 200 dads as well. So about 500 dads, 450, 500 in total. By the end of year 3, we were seeing 500 dads in the year 3 in universal, and about 40 dads in referral, but that was for the whole of Greater Manchester. And we concentrated on some of the bigger areas that we already worked in, like Tameside, Stockport, and Bolton. At the end, towards the end of year 3, we recruited somebody to work in Tameside and Rochdale specifically, and then still had work in the rest of Greater Manchester. So our numbers went up again. And from that, we realised we could share it. So we shared it first with Home Start Gloucestershire, and they recruited a member of staff down there, and then Home Start Salford, Trafford, Salford and Wigan, who recruited somebody for Salford. It went really well. The numbers started to increase gradually over that 4th year. We got more commission through the NHS in Greater Manchester. So they commissioned us to do the perinatal mental health work. That gives us 5 members of staff at my Home Start. Then we started to look at local authorities and local NHS groups, and they started to commission more direct work, so we'd see more and more. So over 7 years, at the end of March last year, we'd seen 19,000 dads, just over. in universal spaces. And just to explain what that is, that's a face-to-face encounter with a dad in a place where he's thinking about himself as a dad. So antenatal clinics are where we get the most dads, and every time we see a dad, we ask them how they are. We're really curious about their answer because dads will tell you they're fine when they're not. So we're really curious about what they say. We'll ask them really direct questions about their situation, like how are you managing with negotiating time off work? How are you getting to scans and clinic appointments with your partner? How are you managing with kind of thing about the finances? How are you thinking about sleep deprivation when that happens? Really direct questions. We also give them resources. We learned really quickly that the resources that dads need are not a leaflet that says if you're struggling with your mental health, come to us, because they're just going to put it in the bin or stick it on the fridge and ignore it. What they really needed was something that was educational and informational. So we have a Dear Dad leaflet. We can get them all over Greater Manchester. Antenatal clinics, health visitors, everyone's got access to these flyers. And it has information in about how to get to know your baby, so what your baby does and can do, and the importance of interaction with them. It also has information about mental health, both for dads and their partners, what to look out for and what you might be feeling and what that might lead to. It has information about doing skin to skin, because it's one of the most important things we can do with our babies. It has information about ICON, which is about coping with crying, because that's really difficult. And it's got information about where to go for extra support. We built that knowing that the three things we really wanted to support dads with were attachment and bonding, which is how babies relate to us, and that improves their life chances, their development, their brains. Mental health, both for dads and mums, and then also reaching services that dads don't often reach, like mental health services, talking therapies, men's groups like Andy's Man Club and Directions for Men, Mental in Greater Manchester. There's loads of those types of groups. And dads don't reach them the way we want them to, so trying to help them to reach more of that. And then the third thing we do in those encounters is talk about the baby. That could be asking them whereabouts they're up to on the journey. So if they're at a scan, it's like, what scan are you at? How far along are you? Have you got any questions? Do you know what's going to happen next? Do you know who the services are around you and your partner? It could be giving them facts about being a dad, like, did you know that dad's hormones change when your partner's pregnant? Your testosterone levels drop. There's estrogen levels that go up, called prolactin. Vasopressin is another hormone that changes, all to help us to be more attuned with babies, to be calmer, to be more engaging, more interactive. And also one of the other changes is that testosterone levels go up when babies cry, and that can make us quite frustrated if it goes on for a while. We can feel frustrated with that more than we would expect to be. That can be confusing for dads, and we want to make sure they understand that they can look after themselves and their baby even when that is really, really frustrating.
A lot I want to dive into there. A lot of work that you do, a lot of good education, information that you're giving to dads. I want to rewind to, you said, you're asking dads, how are you? And one thing you said is, don't answer honestly. Why?
Well, there's a lot of talk about stigma in men's mental health, and we absolutely accept that men and society don't view talking about emotions in the way that we should do for the best of our health. And so sometimes we avoid the conversations. I think what I'm learning through the work that we're doing is it's not always a conscious decision to avoid those feelings. Often they've not even acknowledged that those feelings are there. We have dads that come to us with very practical issues that after a little bit of a chat turn out to be actually emotional issues. Things like they can't cope with sleep, so they're not working at the best of their capacity. Actually, they're worried about their partner having to get up with the baby in the night, and those things can really, those conversations really help. So sometimes it's that expectation that we need to be strong, but what I found with dads in particular, more so than I found within men's mental health in general, dads want to protect their family from how they're feeling, because they don't think that they should put that on their partner or their children, and they try to protect their family from how they feel. And sometimes that means avoiding how they feel themselves. But there's ways around that. Direct questions for dads is a great way to find out how they are. I always talk about Andy's Man Club because they've got such a great platform. And one of the guys at Andy's Man Club, Dan Rowe, is a good friend, really great talker on the subject. And we always consider how men will talk with the right platform, and it's the platform that we need to offer them. It's not about trying to break the stigma. It's not about encouraging dads to be more emotional or more in touch with how they're feeling. And all of that will be great in time, and we're all doing loads of work to try and do that, but it's a long-term goal. It's not going to happen for the dads now that need support now. So we have to offer them the platform, and for a lot of dads that's asking them how they are, being curious about what they tell us, and asking questions about their situation that they want to answer. So we can figure it out when we get in front of the dad. The difficulty is getting in front of the dad.
Why? Because
they're not available in the way that mums are in the services that work with families. So for instance, antenatal clinics are full of dads. We see it's over 98% of dads attend an antenatal appointment with their partner, at least one. It's usually a scan. So when we go to scan clinics, we have staff and volunteers that are there, we have flyers and pull-up banners and stuff. We're seeing a lot of dads in those spaces. After that, dads are not available because they go back to work after 2 weeks. They prioritise work over appointments with health visitors because they sometimes feel it's for mum. So dads' availability is probably one of the biggest things that we need to figure out. So we go to them. We don't wait for them to come to us. We don't say come to us if you're struggling. We don't say come to us for education. We say we're going to come to you. We're going to ask you how you are. Even in antenatal clinics, we don't sit at the back with a table and a stall. We go and speak to the dads while they're sat down waiting. It's just the easiest way to get a conversation going. And we don't expect them there and then to offload all of their troubles either. They're not going to start telling us all about the fact that they've got anxiety or depression, or they're worried about the partner or the baby's ill. They're going to say, yeah, I'm fine. We're going to say, are you sure? Because being a dad's really stressful. We know it's stressful. Is there anything you want to talk about? And they'll be like, well, I'm a bit worried about work, or I'm a bit worried about something. That might happen. But what we are doing is telling them that we're interested and that we're here when they're ready, and that later on down the line, when a midwife or a health visitor or a member of the perinatal team or social services, sometimes even family hubs and children's centre staff will say to them, I think it'd be great if Dad Martins gave you a call, can I send you details? They're going to go, oh yeah, remember them, I've seen them, or I've had a flyer from them, or somebody's talked about them before. So we're setting up a long-term relationship with the dad, and engineering touch points, because touch points are where we don't see dads that often. But mums get quite an intensive amount of contact with services. The amount of midwifery appointments, and then postnatal appointments, health visiting appointments, and then if they need extra support, there's specialist teams that do lots and lots of different things for mums. So there's an expectation for mums that they'll be able to access support. For dads, there's an expectation that they'll help mum to access support, and then they'll just get on with their life as an employee and fit in being a dad around that. And we can help with that.
Do mums get screening for postnatal depression?
Yeah, they are asked the question at every appointment that they go to, how they're feeling. They have specific screening tools that they would use. There's the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale, which is great. It helps to start a conversation, is the main thing. But they're asked at every appointment by professionals how they're doing, how they're feeling. There's other tools that they might use in different services, but absolutely they are, and it's in focus for professionals around families. Dads are not routinely screened unless their partner is accessing specialist mental health support, and there's an expectation that dads will be screened. In Greater Manchester, we work with that team who do that specialist support, so we get referrals from them. They're called the Community Perinatal Mental Health Team. And we offer dads one-to-one support, we do the mental health screening, and we also offer signposting when they need that as well. So it's a pathway, if you like, so dads are included in Greater Manchester. But that's only a small amount of families. There are tools that we can use to screen dads, but there's no capacity in services, there's no expectation or statutory obligation to do that screening yet. So nationally it's in focus for organisations like us, like Fatherhood Institute, and other dads services that really feel there should be screening for dads routinely, particularly antenatally when they're available more. The Fatherhood Institute, we've got a campaign at the moment called Look Out for Dad, I think it is. And that's all about trying to figure out how we get that package of screening and support and signposting in for dads, and it becomes routine within services that see families.
Why is it not already routine?
It's really a recent shift that dads are available in those spaces. I mean, you can look at maybe 70 years ago, men stopped going to the pub when babies were being born and started going to the hospital. There was an ambition for dads to be more supportive for their partners, to be more involved in their baby's life, which is a natural occurrence for dads. And I think the few hundred years before that, like the Industrial Revolution, places like that, men were expected to be working, and they were working 12-hour days, 6 days a week. There wasn't the capacity or the energy or even the space to think about the natural urges that we have as dads to be dads and to be partners. So now we are more in touch with that. We have more time to think and feel and reflect and dwell on it. So we have more ambition to do it. And services are catching up. That's the top and bottom of it. They all recognise the importance of dads, not just to mums and babies, but for dads in their own right. They recognise the impact it has long term on babies' development, on society as a whole, on the amount of money that we spend on supporting babies who don't have good starts to life. You know, there's an impact across all of that. And now we're catching up with how services deliver services, how politicians and commissioners commission work and spend money and allocate money. Allocating it around babies means that dads are included, which is a great way to do it. So there's a lot of catching up to do, but it's happening and people are aware of it now, which is good.
Moving in the right direction then.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's one thing I was thinking of when you were saying that the system's almost playing catch up now, because the role of the dad has changed. Like you said, we've got a lot more time, but still not considered as the mum is in them spaces. Another thing you mentioned was attachment and bonding. Let's talk a little bit about attachment in the early years and why that's so important.
Absolutely, it's our bread and butter. So babies are vulnerable. About 500,000 years ago, babies' brains grew, which is why we're so developed, because our brains are so big. As a mammal, it's bigger than it should be for a mammal of our size. And because our brains were so big, and we were bipedal, so birth canals were narrower, babies had to be born earlier than they should be. And technically speaking, so Dr. Anna Machin talks about this a lot, and I was listening to her yesterday, so I've got it fresh in my mind. So technically speaking, babies should have another 9 months gestation before they're born, before they're ready to be born. That means they're born much more vulnerable than they used to be. That meant that mums had to have support to look after babies. So across the world, there's different ways that happens, but dads are a massive part of that. That can be, it's not a biological dad as well. So biological dads tend to be in the West, they tend to be the ones that are around, but there are other places in the world where villages of other mums and dads and grandparents and uncles, they step into that social dad role. All of that is because babies are vulnerable and need to be safe. So what babies have evolved to do is attach to those grown-ups to know that they're safe with those people. So when they're born, they're looking for facial expressions, literally from the day they're born, they're looking for a face. They recognise faces, they can focus on them from 30 centimetres, which incidentally is from nipple to face. So that's the distance that they will be fed from. They recognise things like smell and voices. From about 20 to 20 something weeks, they can hear in the womb. They can then start to distinguish voices while they're in the womb at about 28 to 30 weeks. So they know that there's two voices. They recognise that they're both different. They know how mum feels when dad's around, because mum shares hormones and things with the baby. So if that's a stressful relationship, babies feel stressful. If that's a calm relationship, babies feel calm. When they're born, the first hour is really important for baby and mum, because they're suddenly separated. Babies don't think that they're separated yet. So it's really important for babies to be in the outside world, but with mum. They still feel mum's heartbeat in the same way they felt inside if they're on mum's chest. It also helps with kind of hormone transfers, pheromone transfers that help with things like initiating feeding, stuff like that. If babies can't have that with mum for whatever reason, if mum's had surgery or she's unwell or whatever that might be, then dads are usually offered it by midwives. They'll say, let's do some skin to skin, baby needs it. And babies might try and latch on with dad. They'll try and suck a nipple and be disappointed if it doesn't work. It just shows that they feel safe and they feel calm and they feel comfortable enough to do that. Babies don't mind a bit of chest hair. They just want to be skin to skin. It releases hormones in them. It also releases hormones in dads. Oxytocin is one, dopamine another one. Really good hormones that help us to fall in love with each other and bond and with each other. But for babies, a very specific set of circumstances that helps them to know that dad is a safe base for them. And as they build that bond and do skin to skin, we also start to look at the interactions that dads have with their babies. And interaction is all babies have. They only have the relationships around them. That's how they build everything. So their brains at birth are about 20% of their full capacity. By the time they're 2, they're 80% of their full capacity, full development. And that's a massive shift. So we call it the first 1,001 days from conception to 2 is key in the development of babies' brains. And one of the best things we can do is help babies to feel safe. So they build safe brain connections that help them to navigate situations that are difficult. We do that by co-regulation. So you might hear people say babies should, self-soothe or be able to regulate their emotions or self-regulate. They can't do that. They need us to do that with them. And when we co-regulate, they learn how that looks and they learn how to do that. And it could take years and years for them to get to the point where they're able to do it, but they're better able to do it as teenagers, as toddlers, when we've done it with them in the first 1,001 days. All of that is done through interaction, as I just said. Those interactions are really subtle and we don't always acknowledge it. And a lot of dads that I speak to will be doing all of these interactions that are really crucial and not even realise that they're doing it. So for instance, I was talking to one dad who was telling me that he thought that he wasn't really bonding with his baby in the way that he wanted. And while he was literally telling me that, his baby did a little startle at about 5 weeks, 6 weeks old. And the baby startled and threw the hands up, and dad put his hand on the baby's tummy, turned to the baby, said some soothing words, said, "It's all right, I'm here, I've got you." Give her a little kiss on her forehead, and then turned straight back into the conversation with me, telling me that he wasn't bonding with his baby. And I pointed it out to him, and as soon as I pointed it out to him, he did more and more and more of it, and he was looking at the baby more, and he was looking for those cues from the baby more to interact with them. And that happens often. Some of the other things that we might do, you might notice when there's a child upset, look at how the parent interacts with them, because they'll not notice that they're doing this. When the baby cries, or even a toddler or a younger child, when they start to cry or they're upset or they've hurt themselves on the park, the parent that's soothing them will frown at them and pull the same face that they're pulling, like a sad face. They'll go, "Oh, are you okay?" And then the baby then knows that parent understands that they're feeling not so good. And then the parent will regulate their facial expressions to a calmer level, and then the baby will understand that it's okay, they're safe, even though they're hurt. And then the parent might even start to go one further than that and be happy and jokey and maybe even laugh about what's just happened. And that sometimes brings the child around to thinking, yeah, I fell over, it was a shock, I've hurt myself, but I'm safe, it's okay. And actually, it might have been a little bit funny. Dads are really good at that in particular. Teasing is one of the things that dads bring to the table, with roughhousing play, all of that kind of physical play is all about risk assessment. And the more we do it with babies, the better they becoming independent, resilient when they're older. So yeah, there's a lot of that happens in those first 1,001 days, but dads play a very specific part. We're not a second mother. Evolution doesn't like redundancy, something that Anna Machin said. That means that things don't evolve twice. So parents are not the same, mums and dads are different because dads have evolved to be different. You'll hear Anna talk about how mums nurture inwardly. That means that they pick babies up, they nurture them, they keep them close, they hold them tight. They're a safe place for that baby to be with. When dads nurture, there's a similar interaction in terms of building that, but they nurture outwardly. They point the baby at the world and say, there's the world, it's difficult, it's challenging, there's things that you might not like, there's things that you might need to work on. I'm your safe place to do that from. You can come back to me whenever you need to, let's do it together, let's navigate this world together. And that's a really profound difference in how babies then can develop. Just to say though, our brains are magic. They do things that are amazing. So if you're a single parent or a same-sex couple, your brains change when you have a baby, when you become pregnant, when you hold your baby, so that we fulfill all of these roles. So nature makes us do it, whether we're a same-sex couple, a single parent, or a mum and a dad situation. Babies get what they need from us because our brains are so unique. So I wanted to point that out, because while we talk about dads a lot, we are Dad Matters, and dads are the second biggest group of parents. There are lots of parents out there that wouldn't identify as dads, so we want to make sure we're including them. There's just not as much research there, and hopefully that'll change.
I'm sure it will. So if that attachment isn't secure in the first 1001 days, I think you said, how does that impact long term?
There's a few different things it will impact on. Behaviour, regulation, emotional regulation. It's all about, if you feel safe enough to explore yourself and understand yourself and reflect on situations, and then explore different situations and different experiences, that comes from that safety net that you had as a young baby usually. When you're older, if you didn't have that safe, secure connection when you were younger, your brain's wired in a protective state. So rather than cry out for help, you would do it inwardly. That means that people are less likely to access support, more likely to use substances, more likely to be involved with the police, more likely to have less educational attainment, things like that. But there's things we can do about that too. So it's never too late to change that for children. It's never too late to start a relationship with a baby and create brain connections that help. Some of the therapies that we talk about, like CBT, EMDR, things like that, they rewire those parts in the brain that are hardwired from being a baby or from trauma. They rewire it so that we have new pathways that we can rely on. The old ones are still there, and so sometimes we revert to those pathways in our brain, but it gives us tools to use to manage it as well. So it's not a lost cause. It's not like suddenly that baby, that's all gone in those first 1001 days. It just means that they might need extra support. There might be other types of services that might want to be involved and help to be involved. And they might develop issues that become greater for them than they would have done in the first place. But we can catch them up if we need to.
That's good to know that it's not fixed, and it's like you didn't get the upbringing you needed, but we can still work on that, we can still change that.
Without a doubt, there are children that have been through really traumatic early experiences, from even beyond the first 1001 days, that really understand the situation and then can become advocates for it once they've got the headspace and the support that they needed to rewire or think about how they cope with those situations. And you see it in all walks of life. There are people that can do these tremendous feats of overcoming that adversity. It's not always easy. It's not always obvious what you need to do, and sometimes it's easier to avoid the work that you need to do that. But it's definitely something that can happen.
I feel like I just got a lot of education there around topics that obviously I have no idea about, but in the future I will. So thank you for sharing that.
And there's loads of resources out there to find out more. There's the Parent Infant Foundation have some stuff on their website. There's the Association of Infant Mental Health, or AIM. They have videos and resources. Our website's got loads of stuff on it. The Dad Pad is a great place for dads to go for more information about caring for babies. Home Start across the country, they have loads of information as well. Best Beginnings have an app called Baby Buddy, which is another great resource. Tons and tons of things that are great. Oh, there's one called Anya as well, which is has loads of infant feeding information on, but has loads of stuff about other aspects to attachment bonding too. So yeah, there's plenty of stuff going on.
Cool, we'll jump straight back in. So couple apps you mentioned there, Dad Pad and stuff like that. I love how accessible that is. I think it's so important nowadays. Not many people go to websites and read leaflets and stuff. So to have it on your phone, you can kind of just take your time to explore it on your own and figure things out. And you don't have to share that with anyone that, you know, I'm learning things from this app. I feel like I should know it. So yeah, tell us a little bit about them apps, or, you know, choose one of them apps.
Well, I think I was saying before about us having resources that are educational. So men come to services through those educational resources more than they do through reaching out for support. So as I was saying, we've got one that talks about mental health and attachment bonding, and on there we'd signpost to other places. So DadPad's a great example. It's an app that you can download. It's also a hard copy that you can buy, I think, from their website. And it's meant to be used like a manual. So you don't buy it and read it cover to cover before you have a baby, although some dads probably have done that. It's about when you've got a question about crying, you go to the page on crying and it talks to you about it. And then it signposts you to different like local services, things like that. So where Dad Matters is, it signposts to Dad Matters. Where we're not, it'll signpost to other places that might be dad friendly or that might be services that dads should access. So it's really important that so DadPad's obviously aimed at dads. They also have a partner pad which is aimed at LGBTQ families, and I think they're developing a mum pad as well, just because the platform, the ease of it feels good. The printed copies look like an iPad, but they're on like a flip, and it's white clean, so you can keep it in the baby's room. If it gets sick on it or milk, it's fine. But it's really good. It's got loads of different topics. It's been built with dads in mind. The language and the imaging is all about dads. There are other organisations that have dad content on them that might be aimed at both parents, but then have dad specific things. So Best Beginnings is a charity that does a lot of work around supporting babies start to life. They have an app called Baby Buddy that has a similar content to DadPad, with videos about dads and questions and answers and lots of stuff on there. And then Anya is like an infant feeding app. We're using it across Greater Manchester at the moment, quite a few places, and that has, again, loads of information. The beauty about it is, like you said, you can pick it up when you're ready to pick it up. It doesn't feel pressured to use it. We know that when we give leaflets to dads in like maternity areas, like antenatal clinics, we'll give it to the dad and say, this has got loads of information in, and we'll look at the mum and go, make sure he reads it. And the mum will give him a nudge and they'll laugh about it, and they'll know that they know what it's like. It's stereotypical, but we can joke about it because we're dads as well, we're parents as well. We understand that you're going to get loads and loads of leaflets. There's going to be a pile on the coffee table. One of the things we were really clear about was that our leaflets had to be dad friendly and branded for dads. They had to have images of dads on there. They had to say the word dad on it. It needed to use a blue colour, because even men that don't like the colour blue relate to the colour blue when it's on resources. So we needed to do all of that sort of stuff, but it also needed to not be a photocopied NHS leaflet, because that's all of the leaflets that you get. It needed to not sit in a pile and look like everything else. It needed to stand out. So we did a lot of work on branding and colour and language. We know through the Fatherhood Institute, they did some research into it that said that you need to use the word dad, because if you use mum and family, or women and families, or parents of, even, dads don't relate to that. They assume that means mum. They defer that to mum. So you need to use the word dad. That means you need to use additional language, because not all parents are mum and dad. So we want to use mum, dad, co-parent, intended parent for those that are coming to it through adoption or surrogacy. So there's plenty of ways we can be inclusive and reach dads. We were really clear at the beginning as well. The dads told us that stock images of men and dads, they see the same ones, because there's not many about. They see the same ones for every service, and so it's really hard to distinguish services. So we were really clear we were going to ask dads that we came across if we could use pictures that they'd taken. So all the pictures in all of our leaflets, on our website, on our social media, they're dads who've sent us pictures. They've given us consent to share those pictures, and they're in the moment. They're taken by a partner, some of them taken by the midwife who's birthed the baby. You know, they're real, down to earth, in the midst of the action pictures. They're much more relatable, because they're the ones that we see on social media. They're the ones we see our mates and our families sharing. So when we see them, we feel comfortable, we feel connected. when you see the same picture of a dad holding a baby on every poster in every maternity ward that you go to, it just feels like, they're just paying lip service to dads because they're not dads that have been to this hospital. That dad probably doesn't even live in the UK. Like it's obvious that it is. The same when it's like a studio photo from a real photographer's camera, if you like, that's been edited and the lighting's perfect and the all of that stuff's great. The good ones that you get from them are, I know there's a guy called Al from Dadsnet. He was doing a photo shoot with his baby who was naked on his arm, and the baby pooed or weed, and the picture was just poo coming or wee coming out of the baby, which was hilarious. So those kind of real life situations, they're good as well. But generally, we just try and ask dads for pictures, and we use them, and that's the reachable way of engaging. One of the challenges is you have to commit to opening an app. So I could tell you that there's an app for something that you're really interested in, and being a dad is something that men are really interested in, and you'll go, oh yeah, I might download that app. But if you don't download it there and then, you don't download it. It's pretty simple. Unless you suddenly realise that you need that app, and then you've got to try and remember who told you about it, what it was called, and that's difficult. Which is why we give out the flyers with the links on, and we give out flyers with QR codes on, so they can put it on the fridge or put it in a drawer, and they can go back to it when they need to. And we signpost other apps that they might not have come across or might forget that they've come across. So commitment to download the app's a challenge. There's also commitment to open the app, because when you're struggling, until you're ready to get help, it's really hard to just open an app and admit to yourself that this is a struggle. There was some research done in Australia, Newcastle University in Australia. They did a project called SMS for Dads. And what they found was that dads were more likely to read a text than to open an app to read a notification. So and if you think about it, it's really obvious. You get a text, the notification for a text is on the front of your phone straight away. You can't ignore it. So they did a project where dads would sign up when they went to the first scan, and they would get a text or 3 texts every week. One would be about the progress that the baby was making during pregnancy, and then when baby was born, milestones that they might be reaching. One was about like tips for looking after yourself, looking after your partner, and one was a check-in for your mental health. And if you, on the check-in for your mental health, you replied with a negative score, somebody from a charity phone line, which was like a bit like the Samaritans type line, would phone you and check in with you and make sure you're okay. And that's still going, SMS for Dads in Australia. It's a great way to reach dads with information, education. Some places like Halton, which is kind of near Widnes, Runcorn, they've got a similar offer with text messages. They've got an online offer as well. I know we were trying to do something similar in places in Stockport. There's nothing national. There's not a big push for it. It's very expensive software to be able to do it. It's very expensive to manage it, and also the care that you have to be able to offer to dads who use that service is quite high. So you have to make sure that there are responses in place, there are services in place, there's crisis management in place, and policies and procedures. So it's not something that's happened in this country yet. And in Australia, it was a small study. It wasn't nationwide. It was like one area. So it's something to think about for the future. But like I said, committing to an app is hard. So something like DadPad, where you get it at 20 weeks, you scan a QR code, you download the app, because every dad at 20 weeks is really curious about what being a dad's going to be. They might have worries and concerns, they might be really excited, but they're really like curious about it. So that's a good time to engage with an app like that. And when you read through it and you see like a little bit about postnatal depression in men, you might think, oh, I don't need that, and skip that bit. But 12 months time, you might need that. But you've read it, you know it's there because you've downloaded it early. So getting to dads early with those resources is important too.
How does being a dad yourself help you relate and connect to the dads in the groups that you're working with?
It's a key part of it. It's being a parent. within a peer support offer, which is what we would class ourselves as. And Homestart, our peer support through and through, everything is about family supporting families. There's a few reasons why it's important. For me, personally, I've got experiences of things like child loss, and I've parented 2 children. I've been a foster parent as well. The experiences that I've had shape the way that I parent. And now that I know so much more about parenting, the research, the science behind it, the connections we can have with our children, I can really implement that in how I support dads. So if a dad comes to me with a particular issue, I can relate to it. I might not have experienced it myself, but I can understand and relate to it because I've experienced similar things in similar ways. I've had similar emotions. That's a great way to connect. It also helps the dads that we speak to know that they're in a safe place. This is a great place to share what you're worried about, because these people have worried about it as well. They've got the same concerns that you've had. They're through it. One of the best things that I could say is knowing that it will be okay is important for dads, because when you're in the midst of crisis and everything feels like it's going wrong, it can feel like it's always going to go wrong, that there's never going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. But being able to speak to a dad who's been there and is okay now is a really motivating factor to do the things that help you to be well, and to do the things that will help to improve your situation. Knowing that doing those things can help is important.
How did you find the transition into parenthood and being a dad?
I was quite young, and I think I was always aware that I wanted to be a dad from being very young. When I was very little, I used to feel like my relationship with my dad was a big part of how I felt about being a parent. Like, that's what I wanted. I always felt like the fun parent. But then thinking, as I got older, thinking about the careers I wanted. When I was 14, I wanted to be a midwife or a teacher. They were the 2 kind of options that I was looking at when I was picking my GCSEs. And I was told, this was like in 1994, I was told I couldn't do childcare because I was a boy. At the school, the careers teacher laughed and said, "You can't do childcare, you're a boy." So I decided to be a teacher instead of a midwife when I was 14, 15. I wish I hadn't listened. I wish I'd have pushed back. And now I encourage teachers to think about the way that they engage with pupils, about what they're doing. And I'm sure that wouldn't happen now. It did then, but it wouldn't do now. So I decided I wanted to be a teacher. And when I was 16, the first job I got was in a play centre, doing children's parties, playing in the ball pool. And then I started to work in an out school club. I ended up dropping out of uni and not becoming a teacher immediately. So I went to be a play worker, and I did a play work MVQ. And that was learning a lot more about child development and play and how that works. And then while I was a play worker, I was 21. I had my first daughter. We'd lost a daughter before that, who was stillborn. And from that point, I was 19 then. I was a dad, but I didn't have a baby. So it was a bit of a weird transition. And so I always see when my second daughter was born. She's 26 now. She was perfect little baby. And that was the point where I started to think about the transition here is challenging. I struggled with a lot of personal things, relationships broke down. Me and her mum weren't together for the first few years. We got back together after 4 years and had another baby 7 years after after my eldest was born. So I really struggled those first few years. I wanted to be distracted from. I wanted to be a dad as much as I could be, but I wasn't around because we were separated. So the days that I saw my daughter were my happiest days, without a doubt. The days that I didn't were days that I went out drinking, I went out clubbing. I had friends that would encourage me to do more healthy pursuits, like play football and go camping, which was good. That was a better distraction, but I still drank a lot more than I should have done. my dad was great. My uncle, Andy Kearney, I'll mention him because he'll probably listen. Were both great around that time for me. Really helped me to understand that being a dad was the priority, and helped me to shape my life around that. So after a year or two, when my daughter was toddling a bit more, like, I felt much more able to be the dad I wanted to be. And then fast forward to my youngest, who's now 18. We were back together, we were living together, we were settled, and that experience was the making of me as a dad, without a doubt. I was more connected to services, I was more confident in approaching people for advice. When she was about 6 months, I started working for Sure Start, which was an early years service in Bolton. So I was working with midwives and health visitors and all the people that I could get as much information from on. I just wanted to soak it up. And I was with her more, so I was more interactive. I understood the dynamic between parents and how that shifted, and how you can't both give 100% all the time. So when I was struggling, my partner would step up, and when she was struggling, I would step up. And if we were both struggling, we'd manage it together. And I felt we did that really well. And so I think, yeah, absolutely, all of that transition, they were all different. They all felt different. And it's only really in the last few years that I've been doing Dad Matters that I've reflected on the impact it had on me as a dad. And the transition is not easy. It's not easy in the best of circumstances. So when the circumstances are difficult, it becomes harder. And there's not as much support out there. There's not as much information out there for dads, or expectation. And so sometimes, I've come across dads in this line of work where they think the babies don't like them. They think the babies are crying because they don't like the dad, or the dad doesn't know what they're doing. And so they want to stop the relationship for the baby's sake because it's best for the baby. They only need the mum. Mums are naturally gifted at this. But they're not. Mums learn because they have more time, they have more input, they have more people around them. They learn quickly, much more quickly than dads do. So for dads, that transition might take 2 years instead of a few months. But we expect that it should happen straight away. A lot of men think, I'll hold my baby, I'll feel this rush of love, the bond will be there. And that doesn't always happen. Sometimes it does, but it doesn't always happen. And it takes time, and it takes work, and it takes interaction and motivation to stimulate that process. Then the more time you can spend with your baby, the more quality time, should I say, rather than quantity, the better that bond gets, and the more quickly you experience that transition.
After kind of you had your first daughter, did you take paternity leave? What was that situation like back then?
Yeah, I think with my first daughter it was 2 weeks. When we had our daughter that died, I was working in a pub part-time, and I explained as best I could what had happened to the lady that I was working for. And 2 weeks later, I went back in, and she told me there was no job for me. She didn't believe me. She didn't really care what had happened to me. She just didn't want me to be working there anymore. And that really affected me. It wasn't like I'd taken paternity leave. I just wasn't capable of working. I'd had an experience that was terrible. So it felt like I couldn't be there. And I understand it's a part-time job. It's in a pub. You need to find cover and whatever. But yeah, it felt like there was no compassion, and that felt because I was a dad, without a doubt. When Dharma, my eldest, was born, I took paternity leave for 2 weeks. But I was working for a really good company. It was an out-of-school club, and actually it was really flexible. So I got time off during the day. So I'd work first thing in the morning at breakfast clubs, and then I'd work in the evenings. So I was around during the day, and then I was around in the evenings. And so paternity leave was like the 2 weeks. Dharma and her mum stayed in hospital for a few days, and there was visiting times. I could go during the day for a couple of hours, then go in the evening for a couple of hours, and then have to go home. Which was frustrating because my paternity leave was during those times, so I couldn't be with them all the time. I could only go when visiting was. So when my youngest was born, that had changed, and there wasn't really visiting times for dads. You could just be at the hospital the whole day. You couldn't stay over, which has changed. There's a lot of hospitals now where you can stay overnight. Some that you can't, and that's not because they don't want you to. It's because they just don't have the room or the space or the funding to be able to make that happen. But some hospitals in Greater Manchester do that. But yeah, when she was born, I could go for the full day. She stayed in hospital again with her mum for a few days, so I was able to start my paternity leave later. I worked for the local council, so they had a really robust paternity scheme, so I knew that I had 2 weeks. I knew that I could start it when they left hospital, which was great, so I could still work or take annual leave when they were in hospital. But again, it was 2 weeks. There was no flexible working, really. I'd also broke my sternum a few weeks before she was born. So when she was tiny, picking her up was okay, but as she started to grow over those first 3 months, that started to be really difficult. Being able to put her in a cot, take her out of a cot was hard. And I ended up taking some time off work for having this really painful situation. So I had time with my baby from about 3 months, I think she was. I had about 4 or 5 weeks off, maybe a bit more. And so I was at home and I spent a lot of time with her. And while I couldn't do some of the picking up, like lifting her from a cot, I could hold her on my chest. I could walk around with her. We'd go out for the day. We'd visit family. It was amazing. And I'm a big advocate of the campaign at the moment. The Dad Shift and the Fatherhood Institute have got campaigns to review paternity leave with a 6-week minimum paid at like 90% of your wage, so that more dads can take it. Because right now the situation is you get 2 weeks and it's paid at the first week's full pay, I think, and then the second week is paid at statutory maternity pay, which is about £170 for that week, which is it's nowhere near what you would get. So a lot of dads are choosing to just take 1 week and then go back to work for sake of the finances. You can take shared parental leave, so mums have a full year of parental leave. You can share that now with your partner, but only 2% of people take that up. It's a very low number. Imagine having the conversation with your partner that you want to take some time off work to have the baby, when actually they're already off with the baby and it's their time now. Like, I could never imagine saying to my partner, I want to take some of your time so that I can have time with the baby. And that's how it feels to a lot of men, is they're taking time away from their partner. So it needs to be on top of what mums already get to make it worthwhile. When you look at places like the Netherlands, Scandinavian countries, the paternity leave they have is much better. It's sometimes at full pay. And dads not only are they more involved in their baby's life, not only are there better outcomes for the family, there are better outcomes at work. They have better output at work when they go back. They feel more valued by their employers. So a lot of employers in the UK now are twigging that this is a good thing. There are some out there that offer full-time paternity leave at 12 weeks, sometimes 6 months. Organisations like, I think, Virgin, there's a few other big organisations that can offer it, and it's because they can offer it. There are lots of organisations that would love to but can't. They can't afford to offer that, which is a shame. So it needs to be something that we look at nationally as a national campaign. So yeah, Fatherhood Institute are doing some great work around that, and the Dad Shift is has a bit of momentum. They do a lot of campaign publicity for it. They have a few videos and interviews out as well, and case studies of dads that have experienced that kind of low paternity leave and the impact it has on them. The other thing is, mums need dads to be around, because it's not easy to be a mum in those first few days either. Especially if you've had something like a C-section. Recovery for a C-section is like 6 to 8 weeks. If after 2 weeks you're on your own at home with a baby and you're still recovering from major surgery, that's not fair. That's not fair on the mum or the baby, and it's definitely not fair on the dad to have to leave them there in that situation. Not everybody has support networks with mums and mother-in-laws that can come around and help. So yeah, we need to think about who is affected by dads having extra paternity leave. It's not just the dads who are benefiting, and I think sometimes we think, oh yeah, why are we giving extra dads time off? Sometimes employers think that, why are you having all this time off? You don't need time off. Mum should be doing all of that. But actually, dads want to do it, they're capable of doing it, and if they do it, the outcomes for mum and baby and dad and employers are better. So we definitely need to do that.
It's a bit of an outdated view though. Mum will do it, right?
Yeah, it is an outdated view, without a doubt, but there are still people that think it. Yeah,
of course. And that must be tough for dads, you know, if they're worrying about finances and they want to take the time off the paternity leave to look after them, but they know if they take a certain amount of time it's not going to be at full pay. So it's like, I want to take care of them and be there physically, but if I do that, I can't support them financially, so I'm kind of forced to go back to work and not be there and kind of miss out, if you like.
There is definitely the idea in men that comes from society that we are the breadwinners, and nowadays nobody really has a home where men are the only earners, but the urge to provide and protect is a strong one for men. That's what we do. And so sometimes that relates to I've got to bring in the money. Like, we have to have a roof over our heads, we have to have food, we have to have petrol in the car, we have to buy nappies and whatever else. Like, it's a real stress for a lot of men, and it can sometimes become a focus for them as well. Before babies are born, a lot of dads talk about money and finances and housing being the main practical things that they're focused on. And it's only really when the baby arrives that they start thinking about the amount of time they have with the baby as being a priority then. So we can support dads to understand that, but and encourage them to take paternity leave, encourage them early to have conversations with their partner about shared parental leave, because it is available now and it's something that they could do. They can split 12 months between them both. Dad might only have 3 months of it, but having that time with your child is really beneficial to both of you. Yeah.
Wow. That's some great work that charity are doing that you mentioned, trying to change it. What's the typical response to that when they're campaigning and they're trying to make that change?
It feels really positive. I think everybody accepts that paternity leave isn't great. I think the difficulty is in how we change the processes. How do we make it happen? How can we afford to do this? Because it takes money to be able to do something like that. So the campaigns really are raising the ambition to do it, and raising the ambition to learn more about what it might look like. And we just need to keep on thinking about, how do we implement it? Do we do it all in one go, or are there steps we can take to make sure that we get to the right place? Is there research we need to do to gather evidence to figure it out? So that's kind of where we're at now. Is there's a lot of people that want to do it, both in government, in organisations, in employment. We just need to figure out how we can do it.
Something you mentioned before, I mean, quite a while back in your early years, you used to drink quite a bit, and you had them friends that would encourage you to do more positive stuff, which are probably the ones you want to be around, right? Because, you know, them positive outlets are so important. It's so easy now to be swayed and you know, go out in the drinking culture. What's your relationship with alcohol like now?
Oh, it's so different. When we were separated and we had our daughter, and I'd see her at weekends. I'd see her on a Saturday, so I would go out drinking Tuesday night, Thursday night, and Saturday night. I would never go out on Friday because I had her the next day and I wanted to be okay. And sometimes like Sunday afternoon, Sunday night, like I'd go out all the time. And I had different friends that were going out on different nights, so they didn't know that I was out all the amount of times I was. I would spend all my money going for a drink, going to nightclubs, and I don't think I particularly felt I had a problem with alcohol. I had a problem with wanting to avoid being on my own at home. I live with my mum and dad, and as great as that is, when you're 20, they're not the people you want to be around. And it was much easier to go out knowing that when I get to the pub I will know someone when I get there, than to try and find a football team, to motivate myself to go and find somebody to play squash with. Like those things were more difficult than knowing that I could just literally rock up at the pub, and go to Spoons and have a pint for £1. Like that was much easier. So after about a year or 2 years of that kind of lifestyle, I started realising that I was ambitious in my career. I didn't want to be a play worker. I wanted to work in community development, and I got a job as like a neighbourhood warden, where I worked with young people on the streets talking about, you know, litter, graffiti and social behaviour. I loved it. I loved the interactions with them. Started thinking I want to do more of this in a structured way for like youth services or play services. And then I got a job as a play worker, community development worker, and I started doing more work supporting charities to access funding. And it was at that point where I realised that I could deliver training to people about those things, and that. So then I went to be a teacher again, and I was like a further education teacher. So all of that happened in the space of about 4 or 5 years. And when I got back with my partner, and we had our next baby, at that point, drinking had become social again. It wasn't something that I turned to avoid being at home. I liked being at home. And actually, around that time, I stopped drinking in the house unless we had people over. Like if we had a party or we had friends round, I would only really drink if we went out. And so if we went out, that would be once or twice a week. Usually, like it might be even once or twice a month. So it wasn't as often. And we negotiated it. So my partner wanted to have a drink, so she wanted to go out or whatever. I'd make sure that I'd be home so she could do that with her friends as well. So it was a good kind of balance. I felt good about it. Now, I still don't drink in the house unless it's a special occasion or we've got people over. When I go out, I'm really good at regulating what I drink. I don't just drink to get drunk. I drink beer that I like, and I like rum, so I drink spiced rum that I like. I don't go overboard. I don't really do shots unless somebody just suddenly puts one in front of me. No. But back in the day, like I would just drink whatever I could get down my neck. I drink things that I didn't really like the taste of just because they were the cheapest thing in the pub. But now it's much different. And I see with my kids that they're both a bit like that now. They have a similar relationship. They drink when they go out. They go to parties. They see their mates. They drink in the pub. But they're not really actively wanting to drink in the house the way that I probably would have done when I was their age, which I think is really good. But we have really open conversations about alcohol and drugs, and it really helps to know that, you know, I've been in a place where it was difficult, and I never got help for drinking. It was self-motivating that helped me realise that it wasn't what I needed to do, and I never made the decision to stop drinking or to reduce drinking. The decision was to do more of the other stuff, I think, that meant that I didn't need to do the drinking as much.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say drinking wasn't the problem. And I've had this conversation with a few people, and I completely believe it, because it's often something underlying that's driving that behaviour to drink, whether, you know, you're trying to escape how you feel, you're trying to avoid being in the house on your own, and you want to be social. But yeah, drinking can be a massive problem. How do dads cope that tend to be struggling?
There's a few things that we would look for in dads in terms of mental health. So the usual ones that you get for anybody that's struggling with their mental health, like low mood, changes in behaviour, not wanting to be around family, not liking doing the things they used to like doing, those kinds of things. The truth for mums and dads. For dads, there's some symptoms around anger, aggression, avoidance. Avoidance is where we'd put alcohol, because it's not about the drinking or the drugs. It's about avoiding the situation that you're struggling with, and that can sometimes look positive. We have dads where mums have said, you know, Dad's not at home, and we'll say, where is he? And they'll be like, he's out on his bike. He's gone out on his bike for 12 hours, 15 hours. Or he's working late. He's worked late 4 times this week already. Those look sometimes like positive, like, oh, he's trying to earn more money, or he's looking after his physical health. But actually, it's because they don't want to, they're struggling with the relationship with the baby or with the mum or whatever, and they're struggling with that, so it's avoidance. So we talk about avoidance quite a bit. It's really hard for men because we try and deal with things inwardly, and we don't acknowledge that there's an issue until we can't avoid it anymore. And so that means that we're usually much further along the path than we should be when we're getting help. One of the best ways to deal with that is to talk to somebody about everything. So that doesn't mean that you wait until you've got a problem. You find somebody that you can talk to and you tell them the stuff that's going on in your life, the good stuff as well as the challenging stuff. Getting it outside of your head can really help you to appreciate it, acknowledge it, and then identify if there's something in particular that you might need to work on more or think about more, then you can do that too. Some dads, they defer decision making to mums in terms of what's healthy for them. They'll wait for mums to tell them what they need to be doing as a parent, and sometimes that doesn't really fit well, and that can lead to communication breakdown with families. It can lead to family breakdown. So communication is a really key thing we need to be thinking about. That means educating us on what our dads. We talked a bit about play earlier on. Dads who do rough and tumble play, and they tease babies and they blow raspberries and they hold them in the air, and all of that kind of stuff sometimes doesn't feel natural to mums. And they think, why is he doing it that way? I wouldn't do it that way. Why is he? Which is fine for them to think that. It's okay. It does feel a bit strange, but having a conversation about it is important, because actually it feels natural to dads to do that, because that's how our development, our evolution has made us. So communication is key, but education about what is the difference between men and women, and communication about how that is in our relationship is a big factor in that too, I think. I think some of the dads that we come across that struggle, they struggle alone. That's the overwhelming consensus. They don't want people around them to know that they're struggling. So the way that we get dads in usually is in isolation from mums. They don't tend to come to us struggling through the same pathway that mum comes to the services that she accesses. But it might be a professional that says, have you heard about Dad Matters? I'd like to give you a referral. That's usually the best way. And the dads go, oh yeah. Then they come to us knowing that we're not going to go to their house if they don't want us to. We can meet them in the community. We can do it over the phone. Like, there's support available where they can do it, where they don't feel it's a burden on their family, where their partners and their children are not impacted by them getting support. What they quickly realise is that the support will help that relationship with their families. And so sometimes they'll be like, yeah, come round to the house, come and meet the kids, come and meet the missus. Or they'll invite their missus and the kids or bring them on a walk and talk with us, and that kind of thing helps. But it's knowing that it's a safe place is a big part of that too. It's confidential, unless there's a safeguarding risk. If somebody's at risk, we'll pass it on. We'll make sure dads know that. But other than that, it's a confidential space for them to share how they're feeling, what they're going through, what the situation is, what they're thinking about doing next, and to explore possibilities and actions that they might want to take.
And you focus on like practical things rather than emotions, right? That's something I've heard you say. Kind of,
yeah. Men focus on practical things instead of emotions, and so if we just go straight in and say, how are you feeling today, then they're not attuned with that. They've not thought about what that feels like for them. So if we go in and say, so if it's a dad and he's got a new baby, a few weeks old, the first thing I want to ask him was, how was the birth? What went on during the birth? How was it for you? Was there any complications? How did that make you feel? Is the last question that I ask. If all of that seems okay, I'm going to say, how's sleep? How are you managing with sleep? Are you sleeping regularly? Are you getting enough sleep? How's the baby sleeping? How's partner sleeping? And then we talk about how babies sleep. Like, what does that mean? What's the science behind it? What does that include? And then we might talk about, so how are you managing this? So we don't say how you're coping. We don't say how you're feeling about it. We say how are you managing these things that you're struggling with. And they might say that they're not managing, and then we'll go, well, what do you think might help? So the pathway of conversation starts from a practical point of view. What are the things around you that are affecting you? How are they affecting you? What can you do to support them? And feelings and emotions are tied up in every part of that. They're not independent from that. We don't need to say, how are you feeling about those things, to know how that dad's feeling about it. What we need is for him to know how he's feeling about them. And we do that by exploring it with him.
How are you, Dad? Is that a campaign?
It's been a campaign. Most fathers' organisations would use that. There's we call him the godfather of fathers' mental health, Mark Williams. Great guy. I saw him yesterday at a conference. He's just amazing the way he speaks. He had experiences with birth trauma, with postnatal depression as a dad, late diagnosis of ADHD, and he talks really openly about his struggles. And he, along with some others, Dr. Andy Mayers, who is a researcher in postnatal depression, and there's quite a few others, people at the DADPAD, us, Fatherhood Institute. You'll hear them constantly talk about, how are you, Dad? You'll see the hashtag, how are you, Dad? What we want is for everybody to ask dads how they are when they see a dad. Not just friends and family, not just dads services, health visitors, midwives, mental health staff, family services. All of those people can see a dad and go, how are you doing? How are things for you? How are you today? Those questions can really catch dads off guard, because they often don't expect to be asked how they are. What's really important is, so we at Dad Matters, we used to say, always ask again. We changed that now. Sorry, we used to say, always ask twice. We've changed that now to always ask again, because we don't want to just limit it to twice. We don't want you to say, how are you, Dad? And he says, fine. And you go, how are you really? And he goes, yeah, I'm all right. We want you then to go, I'll check back in with you in a few weeks. We want you to manufacture manufacture opportunities to ask dads how they are. That might be a text message from a health visitor. It might be a leaflet that says, how are you doing today, Dad? Here's some information for you might need. Like, any way we can ask them how they are means that they feel important, and they know that their well-being is important too.
How are you doing as a dad?
I'm doing great. At the moment, things are really good. Yeah, being a dad has challenges, and they don't go away. They just change into different challenges. There's always some. Currently, I'm moving in with my partner who has children, and there's a bit of a transition period where I'm feeling really guilty about leaving my 18-year-old who's 18 and doesn't want to spend time with her dad anyway. So we already do little day dates to IKEA, or we go and do things together. I see her regularly, so I'm feeling a bit of guilt around that. But we talk about it. I talk with her about it. I talk with my partner about it. It'll be okay. We've got plans in place to help with that. She's got somewhere to stay when she wants to come over to us, and it's only a temporary transition. There'll be a point where she has a room at our house, so it's all good. My eldest daughter's 26. She's in a really good relationship with somebody she really loves. She's in a great place. She's looking after her health. She's aware of what goes on around her. We're in regular conversation. She comes over to visit. She lives in Wales. I go and pick her up. We have good chats in the car. We have a little disco, like, sing along. It all feels really good, yeah. And then there's the other aspect of, my partner has kids. She has a 2.5-year-old. She's got a 11-year-old boy. I get on with them really well. Like, I feel part of the family. But living apart is easy because I can go there and just be the fun person. I can play wrestle with the 11-year-old. Like, I'll read books with the little one. She's also got an older daughter who's got a son, and I'm not ready for the granddad title yet, so that's not happening yet. But so there's extra things to think about, like, how am I going to fit in when we live together? How are we going to co-parent? Because I'm not their parent, but we need to co-parent together as well. So yeah, there's loads of things to kind of think about, but it's all good.
And how do you cope when things aren't so good?
For me, there's one thing, it's my go-to when things go wrong, and it's to be outside. If it's raining, it's even better. I just love being stood outside in the rain. So when I'm feeling energetic, that might be a walk up Rivington Pike near Bolton. That's a nice, safe place for me. During COVID, I was up there 3 or 4 times a week, just walking around the moors, walking around the gardens. It's beautiful. I remember my dad died a few years ago, and the day after I found out, I had to make phone calls to everyone to tell them, and I made about 10 phone calls. I put down, I'm getting a bit emotional now, I put my phone down on the last one, and literally just ended the call, and the heavens opened, and it was absolutely pissing it down with rain. Like, we can edit that out. It was throwing it down, but it was chucking it. And I was stood at the patio doors when I made the phone call, and it happened. I was looking out the window, and I just went and stood in the rain. I had a bit of a cry. It was amazing, and it helped to reset. It just felt like a really useful place to be, and I've done that regularly since then. When it rains, if it's throwing it down, I'll put my waterproof on and I'll go for a walk around the block or nip to the shop. I'll make excuses to go out and stand in the rain because it helps. What I found recently, I've lost quite a bit of weight recently, and I've started to be more active. So I've been playing walking football for a few years, and I love it because I wasn't very fit, and I've always had kind of injuries. Playing the walking football gave me a bit of motivation to do more. So over the last few weeks, I've started playing running football. It's supposed to be vets, but it's usually merged with open. So I end up playing against like 25-year-olds. Trying to sprint after a 25-year-old at 46 is not what I'm about. But I love that now. So I'm feeling much more energetic. So I love to play football. And then the last thing's music. Like, we go to a festival with my daughters. We love that. We go to gigs together. I listen to music in the car. I've got playlists for any particular emotion that I'm feeling. Really, like, if I'm really struggling and I just need a bit of space outside my head, I'll just put on Cortinas, just album after album, just play the whole thing. If I'm feeling like I'm tense or I'm feeling anxious, I'm looking at heavy metal, rock music playlists. If I'm feeling really happy and energetic and I really want to be a part, I really want to do something, it's dance music, it's trance from the 90s, like proper house music, none of that bounce music with MCs on. That's too late for me. 1994 to 96, yeah. And so I know how I'm feeling. I'm really in tune with it now. It's taken a long time to get to the point where I can name how I feel, but naming it's important, I think. So yeah, if there's any top tips out there for people to cope, it's name how you're feeling and find out what helps with that feeling. Don't just think that one thing is the go-to. Drinking can help with everything. It numbs everything, but it might be that you need different things for different situations, and that's okay.
How did you feel then retelling that story?
It's emotional, innit? But I don't mind that. I don't mind telling emotional things. I feel quite privileged to have emotional stories to tell. I feel privileged to feel that way when I tell those stories, because if I didn't feel that way, I wouldn't have experienced what I experienced. Yesterday, I was at a conference over in Widnes, and one of the guys who does Dad Matters over there, Tom, was speaking at the conference, and he talked about his journey as a dad of a baby in a neonatal unit, and it was really emotional, and loads of people in the room were emotional. And I think I felt extra emotional because not only was I hearing his story, he was relating it to the work he was doing that I brought to that area. Like, that was my thing that I created, and the reasons that I do it are for dads that have been through things that I might have done or that other dads have been through. And I just felt really overwhelmingly proud of knowing that person was there because I'd done a lot of work to get them there. And he walked back over to the table, and I just hugged him, and you heard there wasn't many men in the room, but you heard the whole room just go, "Oh," when I hugged him, and he sat back down at the table, and I just was like, yeah, it's a good place to be emotional. Like, people need to see it sometimes. It's okay. And like, being emotional doesn't mean that you're crying or like ugly crying even. It's just knowing that there's something that's touched you emotionally. Sometimes it's sad. Sometimes it's overwhelmingly happy. Emotions are a spectrum of things. Like, we can feel them all at the same time sometimes. And that's okay too. So yeah, I feel privileged to be able to share stories that make me feel emotional.
Sounds like really
It's amazing. Oh, without a doubt, it's amazing. And I think now I don't do as much of the dad-facing work. So I speak to dads regularly, but I speak to the staff who do that. And we're seeing hundreds of dads, and they're coming to me every day with stories about something that's happened that's been really good, or a dad that's in a really difficult situation, and we're going to try and help him with other things. A professional that's come to us for advice about a dad they're working with. Like, all of that just makes me feel really proud of the work that I've done personally, but within the team at Home Start, with nationally, with the people that are doing the campaigning. I feel embedded in things that are really going to help babies and dads.
What's next, or what's kind of the vision for Dad Matters going forward?
I have no clue. We're looking at how we can make it more accessible for other Home Start projects to utilise, how we can feed in the data that we collect into research and support people with that, and just continue to reach as many dads as we can in a way that is safe and is appropriate for them, and help other people to reach dads in a way that's safe and appropriate for those services too. That's the ambition for Dad Matters. We sit in our lane, we are comfortable there, we know where our place is. I don't think we need to branch out into things. There's some things that I'd like, personally, I have more ambitions to do that maybe aren't tied to Dad Matters as much. Things like working in schools with young people about parenting. What is parenting and what is attachment, and why is it important? Why are dads important in that process? Talking about LGBT families to high school kids, like looking at what routes to parenting are. I'd love to do that kind of stuff. I'm hoping to do more of that in the future when I get the opportunity to. Delivering training is one of my passions. I get to do it at Dad Matters in the areas we're commissioned in. I'd like to be able to share my knowledge with more people. So I'm hoping to do a bit more of that. I'm also a board member for the Parent Infant Foundation, which is a national organisation that campaigns for babies and parenting services. For that first 1,001 days, they run the first 1,001 days campaign. So being a board member there, helping to shape what they're doing, and represent dads within such a big medium is another big passion of mine too.
I can see you great at training. The knowledge and your ability to then convey the knowledge and engage is good, really good.
Thank you. Yeah, I think what I've realised probably only in the last 2 or 3 years is there's lots of great speakers out there that speak about dads and speak about attachment, and but I think what I've found is that I'm learning that I am actually really good at it, and I've never really thought about how good I am at it. I don't want to become big-headed about it either, but I really feel that I'm confident enough to stand up in front of a crowd and talk about it without prep, without knowing that I'm going to do it. I've been to conferences where they've needed somebody to fill in for a bit, and I've done a 10-minute talk, and then got really, really good feedback. So it's something that I'm really passionate about. But I think the reason that I've realised I'm good at it now is because I have all of the knowledge from the work that I've done, from being a part of the Home Start network, from working with colleagues in early attachment services and the Parent Infant Foundation. I've really absorbed a lot of stuff that's very appropriate to the work I want to do with dads and with babies. So knowledge is huge. But also you've got to be hungry to learn more. You can't be closed off. You can't think, now I know that, that's all I'm ever going to talk about. You've got to know that there are people out there that know different things. There's research out there that shows different data. Find out what it is, and then talk to the people that can help you analyse it. Because I can't read research and analyse it. But there are people out there that can. They'll help me to understand it in a way that then I can translate for dads and babies on the ground. And I feel privileged that I have the skills to be able to do that. But I also now, through Dad Matters and through Home Start, I have a platform to improve that flow of information from researchers, professionals, services into dads and families so that they benefit from that better.
That bridge is so important, because what dads out there are going and reading research and trying to make sense of it and trying to apply it to their life, like that's not a thing. So to have you absorb it, what does this mean in practical terms, how can I convey this to dads in a way they can relate and understand, and then apply it to their life, it is huge.
It's absolutely huge, and that's what those good apps that we talked about earlier do, like DadPad and Baby Buddy. They have that clinical input, that clinical research, and they present it in a way that's presentable and approachable and accessible for dads. I think what we're doing is we're delivering it in a more direct way than an app. We're seeing the dads, we're speaking to them directly. But it's the same stuff, it's the same information, it's the same research, but not all dads can access it in the same way, in the same platform, so we can do it differently.
Yeah. What advice would you give to a dad who is struggling?
It's really easy for me to sit here and say you need to reach out.
Yeah.
You hear it all the time. Campaigns out there for mental health, men's mental health, break the stigma, all of those things. It's really important that we do that. We want dads to know that reaching out is the single most important thing that they can do. Most of the dads that we speak to tell us that after just that first conversation, they already feel better just by telling somebody their story and their situation. But it's not easy to reach out when you don't realise that you need to, or you've not acknowledged the things that you need to reach out about. It's not easy to do, and there's lots of dads out there that are struggling, that don't know why they're struggling. They've parked that particular issue in a box in the back of the brain, and they're not thinking about it. So if you know that you're struggling and you know that you're ready to reach out. That can be to your partner, it can be to a health visitor, it can be a midwife, it can be your GP, it can be a talking group like Andy's Man Club, Directions for Men, or Mental, or any of those men's talking groups. It can be Dad Matters. We've got a closed Facebook group. Join that. Open up on there. It can be a dad's service. It can be anybody. There's lots of people out there. The most important thing is that first conversation about how you're feeling and what's going on for you and what your situation is. What I would also say is, for those dads that don't think they're struggling or aren't ready to reach out yet, read about what it is that you're struggling with. Find a video to watch about it. Go to safe places. We've talked about them today. There's places out there that are just out there to get followers, because it increases their ad revenue on social media. They're influencers. They're not support mechanisms. They're easy to figure out, because if your feed has like things that are not about being a dad on it from a dad service, they're not a dad service, they're a media company, so you can figure that out. So but do some research, find out what you need to find out. Come to our website, we've got loads of links. Go on our YouTube channel, there's loads of videos about lots of different situations, lots of interviews with dads. Go to DadPad, go to Best Beginnings. Fatherhood Institute have loads of signposting too. Go somewhere and try and figure it out, and when you've figured it out, reach out for support and have that conversation. Just that one first conversation will help. Whoever it's with, it will help.
I love that. That first conversation definitely lightens that load for people. Cool. Last question. Who is one person you'd recommend for me to have on this podcast?
I can't just say one. There's so many that will be annoyed at me.
Give me a list then.
It's going to have to be a list, without a doubt. Okay, so there's a guy called Dan Rowe. He works for Andy's Man Club.
I follow him on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Dan Rowe is a beautiful human. He had postnatal depression when his baby was born. And he talks about his story brilliantly. He's talked about it a lot. But he's a fantastic guy to have on. There's also other organisations that support men's mental health. So there's one called Directions for Men. The guy behind that's called Chris Judge. He actually does some hours for Dad Matters in Warrington. And he's really good at speaking about men's mental health. He's also great at speaking about things like substance use, stuff like that. There's a few others nationally that you might be able to get on that are really fascinating to listen to. Mark Williams is a great talker about his story. He's Welsh and he goes at 100 miles an hour, so it's not always easy to understand him. But he's really, really good. Dr. Anna Machin, who I've mentioned before, is that evolutionary anthropologist who talks about. She talks about the science of love. She talks about the science of fatherhood, all that kind of stuff. Away from the arena of families, the voluntary sector in Greater Manchester is great. Looking at who's in the voluntary sector that you can get on, somebody from Home Start would be amazing. We've got my CEO Sarah Cook, and we've also got a VCSE kind of coordinator who works across Greater Manchester called Rachel Hover. I think that it'd be really interesting to listen to them, and what's happening in the voluntary sector in Greater Manchester would be something I think that a lot of people would want to hear. But then in terms of just people that speak really well, I'd love to hear Sam Allardyce on a podcast. Get Big Sam on. That might be a bit far-fetched, but
that's a reach. That
it's a bit of a reach, but yeah, Sam Allardyce would be amazing. And then obviously, I mean, it's hard, but you never know if you don't ask. Like people like Danny Jones from McFly, who did The Jungle and talked about his mental health and talked about. He's now an ambassador for Calm. Like those kind of people that are local, that are connected.
Yeah.
They have such a great presence about them. Yeah, so you never know unless you ask.
Oh yeah, for sure. This is limitless. I know I'll get certain guests on.
Yeah.
Just getting started. But where can people find Dad Matters on socials? How can they get involved? Yeah.
So we've got Dad Matters website is dadmatters.org.uk. Socials is all at Dad Matters UK. We also have Dad Matters at Dad Matters GM, which is just a GM page. YouTube is also Dad Matters UK. We do want volunteers. We have volunteers that help us to reach dads. So they go to hospitals and speak to them in antenatal clinics. They help us to do antenatal education groups that are like 30-minute dad chats. They help us with fundraising. We want people to, run the Manchester run for us. Raising money for charity is a good thing to do too. There's plenty of stuff we can do. But also Home Start. We are Home Start. While we're branded differently to reach dads, we're a part of the Home Start network. So reach out to your local Home Starts in Trafford, Salford and Wigan, Manchester, Rochdale and Bury, and mine at Host, which is Oldham, Stockport and Tameside and Bolton. You can find them on through our website or online social media.
Cool. All them links will be in the description below. Just want to say thank you.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me. It's been great.
Appreciate you coming down and educating me, really. That's what this has really been about, and I know a lot of people are going to take so much value from this, and hopefully we can encourage some dads to reach out and know that there's the resources out there. So I really appreciate that.
No worries. Appreciate having you.